His skin hung from his body in bleeding tatters. There was not a patch anywhere larger than his palm that the Roman lashes had not torn open. Sweat, blood, and spit ran down his brow into his eyes, blinding him to everything but the hot dust at his feet and the guards at his side. Bent under the weight of the wooden cross over his shoulders, he struggled forward as the mob pelted him with stones and curses. He hugged the arm of his cross and pressed his face against the splintered wood as if it were his mother's breast. He focused all of his will on his trembling legs, forcing them onward despite the exhaustion, despite the splinters driven into his face and shoulder with every lurching step, despite the pain and nausea that racked him, despite his aching desire to simply collapse. There was nothing left for him in this world but more agony and despair than he had ever imagined the physical form could sustain. But it would be over soon. Blinking the blood from his eyes, he looked at the hateful faces before him, men and women with stones in their hands, traipsing through the thorn bushes to get at him, shouting his name with such hatred they turned it into a curse. The Roman guards leading his entourage had to turn their flails on the crowd to clear a path for him. In the distance beyond the human commotion, the hill of Golgotha loomed over the hot sky that was growing dark despite the absence of clouds. A woman in a shawl pressed through the bodies, desperate to reach him though she carried no stones in her hands. When she was close enough that the others could see only her back, she pulled her shawl away. Agony even greater than his own etched his mother's face, and her hair was whiter than it had been just days ago. She cried out his name, "Jesus!" and her eyes told him that she would readily take all of his suffering onto herself to spare him. Meeting her eyes in this moment pained him more than the mock crown held fast to his head by the thorns driven under his scalp. He let his gaze fall back to the dusty ground as her grief made his mortal aspect plead more desperately than ever that the next few hours could somehow not happen. But this need not happen. This cup can still pass from your lips. The word struck his spirit like one more fist striking a body beaten beyond reaction. The knowledge that he could spare himself this, indeed could still spare himself all of this, was loathsome knowledge. Every second of the hours to come would be a test of his fortitude, and he could already feel his spirit diminishing, feel his God, his Father, abandoning him. He forced his unsteady legs forward, wanting the time to pass more quickly, wanting for everything to simply end. But the cross grew heavier on his shoulder by the moment. He cried out, trying to keep moving and to keep his legs beneath him, but the burden was so great. If this day were too long, if the torture heaped upon him were more than he could bear, might he actually succumb to his enemy's call? He faltered. His feet became fixed to the ground, legs trembling but refusing to take another step. The ranting and cursing of the crowd grew more and more hateful. The guard at his side snarled something at him in Latin and raised his flail. Jesus heard the leather cords hissing through the air, even over the noise of the crowd. Unable to move, he could only cry out in pain as the flail struck the back of his left thigh. His leg buckled. He fell first onto his left knee, then onto his left hip and side. His arm flopped limply under him, too weak to break his fall, and his face slapped the ground and pushed the thorns of his crown deeper into his temple. The cross landed on one arm piece, teetered, and fell on top of him. The mob roared, and stones rained down on him as he lay bleeding. He knew that in a moment the lashes would fall upon him again, and sandaled feet would try to kick him back into motion. But he could only lie with his face on the hot ground, unable even to lift his head clear of the dust for a breath. The shouts grew louder, more hateful. They hated him for loving them, hated themselves for loving him and then betraying him, hated him again for putting them where they were now. Their fury fed upon itself until their voices became inhuman shrieks, and Jesus could hear the demon voices among them, leading their chorus, urging them on. He awaited the next fall of the lash. Time seemed to grow thick and slow. Darkness descended. The world grew quiet. He closed his eyes. The shouting, the cursing, the lashing all stopped. He thought, even hoped for a moment, that his suffering had already fulfilled its purpose, that his broken body was giving up his spirit. But when he opened his eyes, he saw neither the face of his father nor the face of his enemy before him, only feet and dust in the dimming sunlight. The hot ground and crown of thorns were still pressed against his face, and the heavy cross was still crushing the breath out of him. The feet surrounding him were still, and there was not a sound to be heard but the whisper of the breeze. He closed his eyes again, knowing what was coming. "Do not interfere," he said, managing little more than a murmur. Feet scuffed through the dust behind him. Then the heavy cross rose from him with a quick jerk and slammed down on the ground farther away. Bare feet stepped over him. Above the feet he saw the hem of a vermilion tunic. Hands slipped under his arms and felt his cracked ribs, but there was no pain. The hand seized his arm at the shoulder, hoisted him to his knees, and held him steady until he could catch his balance. "So," said the man in the vermilion tunic, "this is what you set out to achieve?" His human guise was that of a man in his 60s with a large nose like a hawk's beak, sun-darkened skin, deep crow's feet beside small olive eyes, and 2 rows of strangely perfect teeth the color of snow in sunlight. "You cannot interfere with this," Jesus said. His throat, hoarse from hours of crying out under the lash, spoke the words more weakly than he had wished. "And you will not tempt me away from it." The mob and the guards were all around, but they were still and quiet. Their arms hung at their side, a few hands still holding the stones they had been about to throw. The armored guards, lashes in their hands but with no unruly crowd to hold back, stood with expressions of mild perplexity, as if they were awaiting orders to obey. Every mouth around Jesus and his visitor hung open stupidly, and unblinking eyelids drooped over unfocused eyes. "Tempt you," the man sneered. "You still think that I'm your devil." Jesus drew a shallow breath. "When you came to me in the wilderness, I thought at first you were the devil. I know now that you are not." Faint hope shone on the man's face. "If you know now that I am not your devil, then come with me. Why do this?" "This must be," Jesus answered simply. "But it mustn't. Come away with me right now. I can heal you. I could heal myself if I chose," said Jesus. And he found that speaking the words of defiance against his temptation lent him some strength. "Yes," the man said, eyes narrow and appraising. "Yes, I believe you could, even now. So much power." With another labored breath, Jesus said, "You are not the devil, but you are his servant." The man's scowl returned. "There is no devil, you fool. There is only—" "That is why you serve his purposes so tirelessly and so well, because you will not see him. You are his finest servant because you do not know you are his servant. His greatest power is to fool men into serving him when they most believe they are serving my Father." "And you think this serves your Father?" the man asked, gesturing broadly around them. "Letting this happen to his Son? Wasting what you are, what he created? And for what? For these animals?" "Yes, for them. For love." "Love," the man sneered. His attention went suddenly to an entranced man standing nearby, an old Judean. "Do you recognize this one? He was in the crowd at the side of the road a few days ago, laying branches in your path, praising your name. Hosanna! Hosanna! That stone in his hand, is that the sort of love you mean? My friend, there are millions of these vermin, continents teeming with them. Beings like you and me are born only every several centuries, and you are a rarity among even our small number. You are more precious to your Father God and our Mother Goddess than 1 billion of these." Jesus only looked at him with pity. "You have much to learn about my Father." "Then teach me," the man pressed, his voice nearly pleading. "Leave this. Come away with me and let us teach each other. I will show you facets of this universe that would astound even your father. I will show you beauty that will make you forget everything you ever learned about these." "Enough," said Jesus. "This has to be. This cup will not pass from my lips. I will drink of it." He looked again towards the hill of Golgotha at the end of the thorn-strewn path. His real temptation would be there, when his pain would be greatest. The iron spikes and the long lance awaited him. "You will go now," he said to his visitor. "I command it." The man flinched and stumbled backward a step. He recovered after a moment, looking surprised. Then, with a somber nod, he acquiesced. "As you wish. I confess when I came here, I knew I would leave alone. But I could not let you go without—" He trailed off. They were silent together for a long time. "Before I leave this land, I mean, is there anything you want? No rants about worshipping your Father, please. Is there anything you want for you?" There was but a flicker in Jesus' eye, so quick and brief that no human could have perceived it. But the man in the vermilion tunic saw it before the "no" even reached Jesus' lips. The man turned towards where Jesus had looked, and he recognized Mary standing before the procession. Even entranced, her aged face was a portrait of grief. The man's gaze went back to Jesus, looking pleased but not gloating. "Agreed. I will see to it that no one harms your mother." And Jesus, who had not allowed his divine faculties to offer the slightest solace to his tortured human form, allowed himself this single comfort, even to feel gratitude to this being who had desired his friendship, who served the devil only out of sincere ignorance. The man moved towards Jesus, who was still kneeling in the dust, took his hands and gently helped him to his unsteady legs. Then he put his arms around Jesus and kissed his bloody cheek, not even flinching when the crown of thorns cut his skin. When he stepped away, his vermilion tunic was splattered with blood. Sparing them any further painful words, the man stooped down, seized the cross from the ground, and offered it to Jesus. Without hesitation, indeed with determination that might have seemed impossible from a body so broken, Jesus positioned himself under the joint and accepted the weight of the cross back onto his shoulder. The man in the vermilion tunic gave him one last despairing glance, then turned away and began back down the dusty path toward Jerusalem. Jesus resumed his own march, dragging the foot of his cross behind him. Gradually, life returned to the lethargic mob. Eyes blinked and looked around. Awakened sleepers gazed in puzzlement at the stones in their hands, but then saw the ravaged man dragging a cross before them and seemed to remember why they had come here. They cleared their throats, resumed their cursing, threw their stones. The guards, confused to see that their charge had somehow gotten several steps ahead of them, hurried after and resumed lashing the mob aside to clear Jesus' path to Golgotha.